We're going to start with Lulu. Lulu's going to welcome everybody, and then she has some slides we're going to share, and we'll turn it over to Lulu.
Hello, everybody. Happy Pollinator Week, and happy Pollinator Week and happy summer solstice. The reason I'm wearing my sunflower pollinator hat is because sunflowers have started blooming in my yard, and they're a great source of pollen and nectar and oils for very specialized native bees. So I wanted to, let's pull up the seed library. The libraries are open again, and okay, so the Albuquerque Burn Co. Seed Library that's in the same building as the South Broadway Cultural Center is now open. There aren't a lot of people there. Whenever we go, there's very few people there. You know, they still want you to wear masks and stuff, but it's time to plant seeds before the, hoping anyway, the monsoons. So it's noticed that it's open from Tuesday through Saturday, 11 to 6. It's not open on Sunday or Monday because they go along with the hours of the Cultural Center. So it's noticed catalog. They just updated it. I think it was about a day when I got some. So there's all kinds of vegetables. There's asparagus, the Cultural Center, cabbage, carrots, collards, corn, cover crops, eggplants, all kinds of greens, onions, okra, peppers, pumpkins, radishes, sorghum, that's kind of interesting, spinaches, tomatoes, and squashes and watermelons. So that's for the veggies. The flowers, there's a bunch of different flowers, sunflowers and calendulas and marigolds, and then there's herbs, basil, yum, borage, chives, dill, and fennel. So these are all organic, open pollinated as much as possible, really, really good seeds for bees as well as us. So there's the website there. What you have to do, you can't go through the catalog, but you fill out a little form and tell them which seed you want at the library, and they will get them for you. Also, they have a policy now that you can log on and request seeds to be sent to the library where you usually go, so you don't have to drive over there if it's across town for you. So log on and check it out and get some seeds. All right, that's the first thing. Now, we had our meeting, Randy, the next one, please, the catalog. So I was looking in my my American Bee Journal, and we just had a mini meeting for new beekeepers with a panel of experienced beekeepers. There is a magazine out through Bee Culture magazine it's called Beekeeping for the First 3 Years. So I haven't seen it, but we're plugging this. Because there's no mentors right now, you can get this magazine and kind of know what kind of questions to ask before when you get into your hive. So there's the information on that.
Hey, Lulu, I went to that website, and a lot of the things that are probably in these magazines are found on that website. And so it's a great place to just do some research and look up different things. And so, if I was a new beekeeper, I would spend $20 and get the magazines too.
Yeah, the photos are great. There's a lot of good scientific information because it's really good as a foundation for beekeeping these days. Science is very important to help for the survival of your bees. So check it out, check out the website, and you couldn't spend a better $20. Okay, this is the third one. Now I am on the website for people to call me about maybe questions, etc. I have had 6 people call me and tell me that they have murder hornets. This is not, murder hornets are not here. They're up in Washington State and up at the Canadian border, and the scientists up there are doing everything possible to eradicate these. They're coming out now. This is a cicada killer wasp. It's big. It's between 1.5 inches and 2 inches. It's particularly found on the west side because it likes sandy soil. This is they're big. They're beautiful. I think they're beautiful, but it's scaring quite a few people. 2 people who called me had killed them. The other people had them in jars. I asked them to release them. So if you see one of these, please don't kill it. What they do is they're very beneficial. They're predators towards cicadas. And of course they come out now. They emerge now out of their burrows in the ground because the cicadas are out now. They will take a cicada, and cicadas are big too. So of course, killer wasps are also large. They'll take a cicada, they sting it and put it in suspended animation. So then they have to climb a tree because the cicadas are so big and heavy. They have to climb up on the tree a little bit and then fly off to the den. They've made a burrow up to 16 compartments. They bring the cicada in there. Again, it's not dead. It's in suspended animation. They'll lay an egg on it. They cover up that little den. And then when the egg hatches, the cicada killer wasp hatches, it eats the cicada, its protein, and then it goes through metamorphosis. It's an egg, then a larva, and then it pupates, and then it emerges next year around the time that cicadas emerge. So this is a very, very, in the web of life, in the balance of nature, this is an extremely important insect. The adults sip on nectar. They like their sugar, their Red Bull sugar drinks. So please do not kill this. And please, murder hornets are not here. This is an important insect for New Mexico. There you go. All right. We are going to start our program on pesticides and pest management. Miranda Kersten will be talking about IPM, which stands for Integrated Pest Management. She will and alternatives to pesticides. Take it away, Miranda.
Okay, I'm going to, I'll try to share my screen. Too many screens open. Okay, can you all see that? Hopefully. Okay, so tonight I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about integrated pest management, pollinators, and some of the large amount of options that we have out there for pest management. So just to start, I thought we'd talk a little bit about the history of pest management and how our thought process has changed over the past few decades. So traditionally, the strategy was more to aim for more of a complete control of pests. And we could see this through our different chemical tactics that were used, as well as strategies. So crops were bred more with the goal of creating crops that would either deter an insect pest from eating them or to reduce the fitness of an insect pest. So the fitness is just its ability to produce viable offspring. And this has shifted more in terms of thinking of managing our pest populations, looking at that bigger picture and considering why pests are a problem. So oftentimes we have insect pests because plants are stressed for other reasons, which makes them more prone to attack by the insect pest or less able to withstand feeding. So now we have breeding strategies that are more aimed towards pest tolerance, which is the plant's ability to withstand an attack by herbivores. So, sorry, my dog's lay rolling, decided to start rolling around next to me. So our focus has changed to teaching these different strategies for pest health and pest management, and that's led to the adoption of integrated pest management. So with IPM, we're just looking at a combination of different kind of more common sense, effective and environmentally sensitive practices that we're going to use to approach IPM, pest management. So we're going to try to keep our pest populations at a level below which a pesticide is necessary. So our pesticides are going to be left to more of a last resort. And I would like to include, when we talk about pesticides with IPM and other management, that we are talking about both those conventional and the organic pesticides. So let's talk a little bit about some of these non-chemical control options that can be used and that you can talk about with your neighbors when you're outside discussing different issues you might be having. So our first one's gonna be kind of obvious. We're gonna try to prevent pests before they are even an issue in the first place. And a big part of this is gonna be done by taking care of our plants. So like I said, stress plants are more likely to have problems. So we're going to consider this when we're selecting plants for our landscape. So you want to make sure you're considering your soil type, your pH, the light requirements that you have. I planted a bunch of bulbs outside our lab down in Los Lunas, not realizing it's in the shade almost all the time. So bulbs came up in April and didn't do well. We also want to consider the moisture needs that we have our plants, especially since we're here in such a dry climate. So this picture over here, I just wanted to show we planted some broadleaf milkweed, and we made sure to put that drip irrigation out so that they're getting good watering to establish out there. And with plants that we have in place, we want to make sure we're taking care of them. So that's going to be include making sure they're getting the right amount of water. So both overwatering and underwatering will stress plants, and with nutrient management. So that's going to include our fertilizing, because like with water, if we over fertilize our plants, they can also get damaged and stressed. So our next step is going to be practicing cultural control. So with this, we're just looking to make the environment less suitable for pests. So we're going to do this by removing habitat that pests need to survive or overwinter. So that can be things like removing plant residues. If you have a fruit tree, you want to make sure you remove those fruits that have fallen to the ground. With that prevention, work on that plant health so that they can survive if pests are feeding on them. You can also work on changing your planting strategies. So either planting earlier in the season before the pests are active, so the plants have more time to grow and are more able to handle pests, or planting later, so you can kind of try to miss that window when the pest is active. This is a strategy that's often used for squash bugs around here. And then finally, another example is going to be mulching. So mulching can help you with soil moisture, with weed suppression, and with some insect pests. Of course, some pests will also live in the mulch, so that's why you just need to make sure you're out there watching what's going on in your garden. So the next set is going to be mechanical or physical control. So as in the title, this is going to be methods where we're physically removing pests, or we're going to put up barriers. So examples of this are going to be putting up screens, row covers, or fencing. So it's hard to see in the right picture, but we planted some leafy greens in the fall down at the farm, and we put some chicken wire up to keep the bunnies out of our little seedling. And then on the left, we actually put covers on cucumbers. We were trying to exclude the pollinators because we were looking to see if putting flowers out in the field could affect pollination. So with the screens, you do have to remember some of our crops need bees. So you want to make sure you're using screens that either have holes big enough for some of those smaller bees, or removing them when the plants are flowering. We can also do things like just taking pests off of plants. Some people get a little squeamish with this though, because when you pick them off, we also need to kill them. So you can do that either by squishing them or drown them in soapy water. It could be a little cleaner. And same with weeds. We can go and hand remove the weeds that are out there, which can be a little more time consuming, but we can be a little more selective on what we're doing. The next option we have is biological control. So this is going to be using those good bugs and good arthropods that are around. So these are things like ladybugs, syrphid flies, our wasps, and these bugs help to control our pest population by feeding on pests and then reducing their population. So this is one, our next workshop with the Xerces is going to be on, society is going to be on identifying beneficial insects. And we also have some publications out there for that. For biological control, our good bugs need a lot of the same resources that our bees do. So steps that we're taking to protect our bees are also going to help those beneficial insects. So these are going to be things like adding floral resources, because these beneficial insects also need pollen and nectar. Leaving some of those, we might not like aphids, but ladybugs love to eat them, and so leaving those there so that the things like ladybugs have a food around, and then having overwintering habitat for them. A lot of pesticides that will harm the bees will also harm our other beneficial insects, so minimizing that chemical exposure. And then if you're tilling large areas, just to try not to do that for our ground nesting bees and ground nesting wasps that are out there. And why do we want to employ these other tactics so that we're kind of limiting chemical use in our landscape? So first of all types of pesticides can affect pollinators, not just insecticides. So herbicides have an indirect effect because they reduce those flowering plants that the pollinators rely on. And what we consider a weed may actually be a valuable resource for our bees. As like many of our early flowering weeds provide pollen and nectar when other flowers aren't around and when those resources are more scarce. Our insecticides can directly kill pollinators even if they're not the intended target of the insecticide. And with our honeybees, they could bring them back to the hive if they're in the pollen and nectar. And then fungicides can actually indirectly affect bee health and result in death. And honeybees have been found bringing fungicide residues back to the hive, and this residue has been found in the bee bread, the wax, and the honey. And really the full impact of what these pesticides have on honeybees and other pollinators is still largely unknown. The other unknown is that if the interactive effects between these different types of pesticides and when these different types are applied. And so our bees are going to be exposed to pesticides both directly and indirectly. So they can be exposed during application when bees are out foraging, or if pesticides are applied when flowers are in bloom. It can even happen if insecticides are applied on adjacent areas and they drift into the area with blooming plants. And they can be exposed indirectly if they're foraging on pollen and nectar that are contaminated with insecticides, or even in water that's been contaminated with pesticides. And then the bees can bring these pesticides back to their hive. But there are a lot of other benefits to implementing these IPM practices in your landscape, in addition to helping our bees. So the big one is that by practicing these more targeted applications, we're reducing chemical use in our landscape. With doing that, we're going to save money because a lot of our pesticides are expensive. So we're going to do pest management when pests are a problem. Because we're practicing these cultural controls, planting floral resources, this is going to help with soil health, it's going to help with cleaner water, and it can actually help us to conserve wildlife, including all those beneficial insects that are out there. So what can you do, and what can I do, because I'm still working on all of this? A big one is going to be changing our perspective on pests and what a pest is. So over 97% of insects are beneficial. And the other ones, like I said, are going to be more of a problem for other reasons, because that plant is stressed and not healthy. So when we're out there in our garden, it's great if we can expect and accept a little bit of of pest activity. So tolerate some feeding that's going on. And if you can plant more than what you need, you can plant some for those insect herbivores. I put some pictures. So I have recently started gardening and landscaping myself, and it's been a very educational experience. I've been working in IPM for 2 years, but this is my first time actually practicing it on my own property. So I planted sweet peas. I did find aphids in this left picture, and I'll admit I did panic a little bit, even though it was just a few aphids. But I also found in the second picture that I had syrphid flies, which are a beneficial insect. The larva stage eats aphids. So the syrphid flies found my peas. They saw there were aphids, and I'm pretty sure I saw it laying some eggs out there. So I felt good about that. I also had a desert willow planted out front. That's the third picture here. My desert willow also had aphids, so I just have a lot of aphids. But I found shortly after finding all the aphids, these orange kind of oval set of eggs here, which are ladybugs. And I also found a larva in that fourth picture there. So ladybugs found my aphids too. They laid eggs right by their food source there, and ladybug larvae, which some people think are a pest. It looks very strange, not at all like a ladybug, but they love eating aphids. So I'm trying to practice some biological control in my yard. We can also have to consider our neighbors. So this is where, you know, I've been out trying to talk to some of my neighbors since they keep trying to get me to cut all my weeds down. When we're thinking about insects and really, you know, ecology in general, we have to look at the landscape scale. So our actions aren't going to be isolated to our own property. So what I decide to do in my yard can affect what's going on in our neighbor's yard. And so that's why it's a great opportunity to try to get out there, talk to our neighbors, tell them about the bees, also get to know your neighbors and what their thinking is. Because I have also learned it's a lot easier for me to stand here, I guess sit here now and tell you to do something like keeping the weeds in the spring. But when it was my yard this spring covered in mustards, it was a lot harder to keep them all there. I just wanted to spray them all, which I didn't, but it was a thought I had. So let your neighbors know what's happening, that you have bees, the effect that if they are applying pesticides that can have on bees. And I know Steve's gonna talk about more about pesticides, but just a little bit on what you can talk to your neighbors about if a pesticide has to be used. We want to make sure that we're not using pesticides as a preventative treatment. We're only using them when the pest is actually a problem. We're using a selective pesticide, so that's going to be targeted toward our pests as opposed to that broad spectrum that's going to kill all insects. We can ask them that they don't apply them when their flowers are in bloom so that our bees aren't foraging on that pesticide, or applying later in the day when it's hotter and those pollinators are less active. We can talk to them about spraying when it's less windy so there's less drift. Making sure they're always following the label directions since the label is the law. And if you have bees, talk to your neighbors and ask them to let you know when they're gonna spray so that you can prepare, and what you're gonna spray, so that, you know, if it is something that's gonna be detrimental to bees, you can maybe take that opportunity to talk to them about using an alternative. And also to remember, this is all a learning process. So with IPM, there's no one solution that solves all problems. And we do learn when we make mistakes. So just being understanding of, I have to be understanding of myself when I make mistakes, but understanding in your neighborhood when people make mistakes, if you can. And then I just also want to encourage you all to just observe what's going on around you, because that's how you truly find, I feel, the cool things that bugs are doing. So these are all photos that I have found doing field work or just out hiking around and things like that. So last week in this upper left, I actually saw a hawk wasp that had it had paralyzed a spider, and it was dragging it back to its nest. It was very fascinating to watch this little wasp drag a spider up a rock wall. You might also see assassin bugs out doing their job. So this is an assassin bug that has its beak in a weevil, which is a pest of milkweeds. I watched another tarantula hawk wasp on a broadleaf milkweed kind of preening its antenna, and it was just fascinating. There's just lots of insects out there eating things, and once you take the time to sit down and look at it, you'll see it all happening. So I've seen spiders eating things, wasps eating bugs. This was just a cool looking grasshopper I wanted to share because it's really colorful, and you know, not all grasshoppers are actually pests. And I was reading if we have a diverse group of grasshoppers, they can cause less problems than when we just have a single species. And then this one in the bottom left is just a tachinid fly larva coming out of a monarch, because I studied parasitoids in grad school and I find them fascinating. It's not good for the monarch caterpillar, but there are some harmful bugs that they will parasitize as well. And these are some of the resources that we have at NMSU. So if you get this as a PowerPoint, I hyperlink the pictures. So we have Dr. Bennett, our last IPM specialist, and I made a guide on kind of key ID tips to identify some of those beneficial insect groups that you'll find in your backyard. Dr. Bennett also upgraded the integrated pest management for home gardeners if you really want to get into IPM in your yard or know someone that does. NMSU also several years ago put out a guide to the biological control of some of the pests you might find in your yard and garden. So that's going to be different predators that will eat your pests. And then this book, it's not by us. Dr. Canshaw is in Colorado, but it's just a great book. And this link, I found it online. It's available online. Someone uploaded it as PDFs. But it's just 700 pages of bugs that you'll find in your yard, both the good and the bad, so that you can just learn what's going on out there.
Jim?
And that was kind of what I had for today. This is my contact info. So I work down at the Ag Science Center in Los Lunas. Dr. Skidmore is our new IPM specialist, and I put her email, our IPM email, and then we're online as well.
Yep.
So if you have any questions, I can maybe answer them.
I had a question. This is Anita. I just wondered, you didn't address, and I loved your presentation, by the way. It's really wonderful. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, and would be great for neighborhood associations. What about GMO crops? Do we know how they impact? Sorry, I can start my video here. Do we know how they do we know how they impact bees, pollinators?
So there have been studies on if, so like with GMO corn that has the BT, if that was transferred in the pollen. And I can't quite remember what they found with that though, unfortunately. So it would depend on what the crop was modified for and if it's available in the pollen, if that will affect the bees.
Yeah. Okay.
But I can do some more reading into that for you too.
I've heard that Roundup actually over time can cause infertility with queen bees, and that's what I've read in terms of glyphosate, but I don't know if that's true or not. That might be a Steve Baca question.
Yeah, I think he would. Knows more pesticides than I do.
Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions? If you do, you can click on the participants button and raise your hand, and I'll call on you if you have anybody else have any questions for Miranda. Okay, I don't see any other questions.
I will stop sharing for you.
Lulu, you're on mute. Lulu,
So sometimes,
there you go.
sometimes it might take a little time if neighbors are spraying, they get the pest control place, you see it every month, they're spraying for cockroaches and whatever. It took about 7 years. One of my neighbors, she offered to spray my weeds in my yard when the company came, and I said, no, I'll pull some up, and I started talking about pollen and nectar and the bees and ladybugs and all kinds of stuff. And after 7 years, she came over to me. We waved to each other. I noticed that in the last year, she started getting more interested in the plants in her yard and in my bees and insects and stuff. So she came to me and said that, I just wanted to tell you I'm not using poisons anymore. And I said, so what happened? She said, well, you talked to me for 7 years and I finally decided it was better not to. So it might take a while. Be open, meet people where they are, and begin to have a dialogue. Maybe wearing a mask right now in 6 feet, but begin a dialogue. It's a start. So thank you, Miranda. You suggested a lot of good things.
Miranda, Peggy put in the chat, she wondered if you could put the name of the IPM in the chat.
So what happened?
Oh, yes, I saw that, so I just put the links for both of those.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And I see someone asked about nolobate, which is a biocontrol option.
Be open, meet, and begin to. So maybe we're in a mess right now in 6 feet, but do you want to mention about the Xerces Society webinars? Can you, Miranda? So maybe can you mention that or put the link up on that?
I sent the link.
I put the link in the chat.
Okay, great.
The link for that is in the chat. If you scroll up from the bottom of the chat at 6:44, I put that link there.
Thank you, Randy.
Yeah, so with the webinars, we had our first one today. They will be available on YouTube, but it might take maybe a week or so because we are getting the closed captioning so that it's compliant for the ADA. So they'll be on YouTube if you miss them. But we have 5 more. If you go to that link, you can see each one. So next week's going to be on beneficial insects. One's going to be on pollinators in your garden. One's on pollinators, I think, in farms, and then IPM, and then just a question and answer session. So you can attend any that you want. You don't have to go to all 5 that are left.
And it's free.
And it's free. Yeah, it's free.
So does anyone else have any questions for Miranda? Talk about IPM in your own yard, your experiences?
Well, someone had asked about nolobate, which I always understood to be like a growth regulator for grasshoppers, and presumably wouldn't be attractive to bees or other pollinators. Miranda, is that what you mean by a targeted pesticide or control?
Yes, it is. So nolobate, and I'm pulling it up to make sure I get this right. So nolobate's actually, so it's a pathogen, so it's a type of biocontrol. So it's a microbe that you apply, and then it does, it kills the grasshoppers. It can be less effective here because our temperatures get so high. So with the best conditions of it, I have that you'll get about 30 to 40% mortality. But it's less effective if you have large grasshoppers or higher temps. So this is going to be a strategy that's focused just on the grasshoppers. And So it's Noceum locustae, and there's a few no lobate and Semaspore are the two commercially available options.
And also the pheromone traps, particularly for yellow jackets, the queens in the springtime, you can put out pheromone traps to trap them. So you don't have a problem with yellow jackets in the hives. That's another, but you have to put it out early because the queens are flying around in like February. So there's another IPM mechanism.
Yeah, so pheromones are great because they're targeted to whatever insect make sure you get the pheromone for the right insect.
Right.
And
Up in Washington State. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Miranda. I'm
oh,
sorry.
I was just good. So pheromones work by either attracting them, so they'll attract the insect to the trap, and some of them will disrupt mating. So it varies for insects, different insects.
And that's what they're using up in Washington State for those murder hornets. They're using a lot of pheromone traps and stuff. So it works. I do it for codling moths on my apple trees. So anyway, any other questions? Okay. All right. Steve, you're next. Steve Baca. I don't know what your hat is, Steve, now that you're working 2 or 3 jobs at New Mexico Agriculture Department. So he's going to talk about pesticide compliance and pollinator health. Steve Baca.
Right, let me see. I have a few slides here to share as well.
Oh, I hear someone whispering in the background.
Is this microphone working okay sometimes? I've had a little
That microphone is not working very well.
It's not working very well? Okay. Try to adjust it here. How's that? Is that a little bit better?
Not really. It's very, very quiet.
Interesting, okay. I've had trouble on some of these meetings, so let me get there. How's that?
That's a lot better.
Better? Okay. We'll go with that then. So let me go ahead and bring up my presentation and get started with that. So is my screen being shared? That's the first thing I got to figure out.
No, not seeing it yet.
Not
Okay.
yet.
Let me get back to okay, how about now? Do you see those slides there?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
working now. Thank you.
Okay, very good. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So as Lulu mentioned, I've been kind of doing multiple jobs. My regular one with compliance or certification and training, but then my boss had recently left. The past 3 months, I've been kind of working a transition while she's gone or has left, and trying to maintain everything with regard to our EPA grant and just the program in general. So day-to-day basis, it's been pretty busy. And then with the shutdown, it's been even more challenging with regard to all the different components that we had to put in place and plan for in trying to return back to doing inspections and things of that sort, getting back into the field. So really what I did is I had just a few little updates here, but we can dig a little deeper and dive into a few things as I go through this, and as our questions come up by the end, hopefully I can have an answer for you. So we'll just pop into this, and this first slide being with regard to something that Lulu mentioned at the very beginning of the meeting. EPA made a declaration Monday calling this week, June 22nd to 26th, as Pollinator Week designation. Now this is interesting because it relates back to the 2018 Farm Bill. Had some interesting language put into it with regard to pollinators and their protection and research around that. So this is a nice positive. I'm hoping for positive in this case, that pollinators are gaining more traction and attention when it comes to EPA and their designations as they're going through product reviews, especially and looking at label language and keeping pollinators in consideration. You know, you're going to hear a little bit later in this that I'll refer back to pesticide label. You know, Miranda did really well in pointing that out with regard to pesticide use, you know, talking about label being the law, and being site specific, things like that in that regard. So pollinator language on those labels ties in directly to this nice push and that 2018 Farm Bill language looking towards protection and research around pollinators when it comes to the pesticide labeling. So this was nice. You know, it's good to see a positive step forward. And then, you know, I just included just a little snap there of the actual declaration. You know, it's in typical government language, you know, the whereas, and now therefore sort of thing. But, you know, that's released on EPA's website if anybody wanted to take a look at that. Just a little snippet there. Some national issues I wanted to touch base on. There's a group called SPIREG. This is the State FIFRA Issues Research and Evaluation Group. It's made up of state lead agency participants and EPA folks. And it's meant to be just a place where we can come together as the states and EPA, and we bring up issues to EPA that we feel are important, that they should take up with regard to either laws directly related to pesticide regulation or labeling for pesticide products. So if there's any kind of issue going on, a state has the opportunity through this group to bring it up. And so the most recent one did have a white paper that was presented with regard to beekeeper use of pesticides. And this was brought up and taken, you know, decided on that the group is going to take action on this. So it was brought up by North Carolina. And from what they were describing, that there's been a lot of issues with their beekeepers where they are misusing pesticides in essence. And so that's causing a lot of issues for their hives, where they might find a product that would work for some kind of insect control, and it's not being used according to label. It's a lot of times the other things that are perhaps described as being a good product for taking care of a mite problem or things like that, but it's not necessarily a pesticide product, and so there's no label to reference. There's no research that's done to back that up, and so there's been a lot of these issues happening, and so much so that North Carolina decided to bring it up to the SPIREG group, and so SPIREG voted on it after some other states chimed in saying that they've had similar issues with regard to this misapplication, misuse, overuse, and complete use of products that really aren't labeled pesticides to begin with, happening in their states as well. So what this means is that the regular full SPIREG meeting occurred at the beginning of June. It's a 2-day meeting. Normally it's an in-person meeting, but everything's been virtual now with the closure, of course. But we voted on it as member states. And what that means is that the group now with EPA in conjunction is going to take this up and start examining it further and looking deeper into this problem. And EPA will be nice as a partner with this because they do have that 2018 Farm Bill language. They do have that sort of dedication to it now that they put on paper, and it's going to be something that we can look at. So what it'll mean is recommendations will come from this group to EPA for labeling, stricter labeling, or more research towards what type of products should have this label use for beehives or around apiaries, things like that. So I just thought I'd shed a little light onto this as a national issue, but it could and it will actually pertain to all the states, because once SPIREG takes it up and sends it off to EPA, then it'll be discussed throughout the country and all the different state lead agencies. We haven't really seen too much of an issue with this. A few years back, just about 4 or 5 years ago, I was finding an interesting product that didn't have any kind of trace back to some conventional products that were used in agriculture. In fact, it was kind of exotic. And I was finding it throughout a lot of samples that I was taking in bee kills that were happening at the time. Some research showed that it's potentially tied to some naturally occurring chemistry in some flowers that we do have here in the Southwest. So pretty interesting stuff there. But I never was able to trace it back, you know. So, but recently we haven't had anything really with regard to this. In some publications I've been looking at, I see advertisements a lot of times for different products to be used in beehives. And every time I see one, I always go and look it up. I research it and see if it's registered with EPA first. And if it is, that's great, but I need to still verify that it's registered in the state, because any product that's registered as a pesticide needs to be registered in the state that it's being used in, as well as federally at EPA's level. So anytime I come across something that's not registered here in the state, you know, we pass it on, and our registration person will reach out to the company and see if they want to get it registered here. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But if I find something that's not registered at the federal level, then that gets kicked up to EPA, and I let them go after it because they have more ability than we would at the state level. So SPIREG, that's just an interesting group. It's a pretty nice group to be a part of. And, you know, they actually get a lot done because it's a pretty easy place to just bring something up. And it can be through just inspections or investigations or things like that, or it can be from an official sort of white paper showing some research and with some numbers behind it with regard to any kind of research that might have been done towards that problem that they're bringing up. This was pretty much the only one that was brought up at the SPIREG meeting, so it was pretty easy to focus on. But like I said, it's been voted on, and now the full group will look towards this in the coming year and into next season as well, up to next year's June full SPIREG meeting. So more to come on that. You know, whatever progresses there, I'll try to keep the group up to date as I find things out, and if it has any kind of direct repercussion on us here in the state, or anything that we or you guys as beekeepers need to keep an eye out for if you do use any products out there. All right, that's a reminder to all here on the slide, little pop-up there. And this goes back to what Miranda was talking about. You know, pesticide label is the law. And you're going to hear that from us anytime you hear NMDA talk, because that's really what we fall back on. Yes, we have a state law, but we enforce the pesticide label. And so anytime a pesticide product is used, we go back to that label and we're going to look at that language. The big thing with regard to pesticides is they're site-specific. Now, in this case, and Miranda had some good mention about this, she was talking about uses around areas and considerations for other areas. So with regard to pollinators, you know, we see a lot of language now that's going to talk and have specific language saying do not use when pollinators are foraging, or in the times when pollinators are most likely to be foraging, or do not use on plants that are active or that are currently flowering. Now, an interesting part on that is that we've seen more labels come out with not just plants and flowers as part of their language, but weeds as well. And that's huge, because there's a lot of weeds that are going to be flowering, but it's still a weed. And that's going to be things that irrigation groups and other public entities are going to be targeting because it's a weed. Now, if we get a plant that's already at the flowering stage and some entity is wanting to go and spray it, it's probably not the best time to be spraying to begin with. And that just goes along with understanding the chemistry of these products and how they're going to work and when to actually put them out. You know, glyphosate's the big one, and that's the one that is used probably most widely even still with some of the agencies that have stopped using it. You know, right on the label, it's going to tell you that herbicide is most effective sprayed on plants that are actively growing. And that's going to be something that's going to be early stage. Now, if you're getting to a flower stage already, you know, the plant isn't going to readily absorb that, and it's not really going to work too well. So if they're at that point and they're already spraying something that's flowering for that particular type of product, it's not going to work very well, and it's kind of a waste of time and money. So IPM comes into play. If you want to control those weeds, look at the other methods. Look at controlling them when they're a smaller stage, when they're easier to control. Adopt the other methods like mechanical or pulling, cutting, that sort of thing. Planting other desirable things that can out-compete those weeds is another option there. But you know, getting back to pesticides, once again, it's the law, site-specific. We're going to be looking for those particular sites where that product can be used. And if it's being used elsewhere, that's going to be an issue with us, and it's immediately against the law, because the label directs people to not use a product in a manner inconsistent with its label. So it's pretty easy to point out and pretty easy to find whenever we do come across those situations. All right, Driftwatch. Everybody knows about Driftwatch, I hope. If you don't, there are the links there at the bottom of the slide. Now, Driftwatch is the generic sort of all-inclusive site that was created a few years back. It came out of Purdue and is pretty widely used in Canada, and then started to be used here in the States. We have it here in New Mexico. We fund it as the Department of Ag. We pay for this, so it's free to the users. Now, there's been different iterations of this and expansion of it. So Driftwatch you can go to that site and find the other sites that we're going to be talking about as well. Now, the one closest to you guys is going to be Beecheck. And so that was created especially for apiaries and beekeepers, so that it was specific to them. And that relates to kind of the way the map works and the little indications that are put on the map when you have a site that's in there. But it all works the same way. You go in, you register as a user, you indicate you submit an application for your site location. I'm the data steward for the state, so I'll go in and look at that and just verify that everything is in place. You know, you can put as little or as much information as you want for communication, but it's really meant just to be a site where your location can be appearing on a map, and anybody that's going to be using a pesticide in that area will now know they can look at that map and find out where those locations are, so that they can, and there's what we hope and what the program hopes for, is that they'll communicate and they'll have that conversation saying, well, you know, they're going to be maybe planning to make an application, and they know now to be careful around those areas, you know, because of the bees, because of specialty crops with regard to Driftwatch. So, you know, it covers all those bases. There's a new program out that they have for seed producers, and it's being developed now through Driftwatch. And next week, there's a big update that's coming up from Driftwatch. So I wish it would have happened before this, so I could kind of relay to you guys whatever it was, whatever it is. I'll find out next week once they give us that update. But I'm looking forward to it because they've been pretty innovative with the changes and things that they've been bringing up. Like the most recent one is with regard to Beecheck. The phone app works really well, and it's kind of a real-time thing where you can have your phone be out with those sites, and if you move them, you can make those moves in real time to your site location, and it updates everything. So it's pretty cool. But Driftwatch, you know, keep using it, spread the word. I'd like to. I've been getting a pretty regular amount of folks adding sites throughout the state, and so that's nice. But if you look at our map for New Mexico, it really is isolated to Albuquerque, which is nice. We have a lot of beekeepers here in the city. But we do get some from different parts of the state, Las Cruces area, some on the east side on occasion, and then we're getting some out of the northern part of the state as well. Now, one of the things is if you have multiple sites at just one location, there is a way to put that into the site itself. You don't have to just for each hive put a location in, because it's going to be kind of that same area on the map, and it's going to just make multiple circles. So if you have multiple hives, use the option that they have in there. It's a little drop-down box, and you can add the number of hives for the one pin location on the map. So, all right, moving on. This was just a recent issue that we had. I wanted to let everybody kind of know about. We had a call from a beekeeper back in early March. They had purchased a bee pollen substitute, and you know, they're looking at this eBay site, and they see the packaging, they see the original container, and they make the purchase. Well, when they get it, it's actually just in a Ziploc bag with no labeling or information. So the seller was contacted, and they were told that they buy it in bulk and then divide it out into smaller amounts and sell it that way. So it was purchased and used. One of the hives rejected, I guess, entirely the substance, and then the other one had dead bees covering the pollen and that other second hive. So we took a sample of the pollen. I don't think we had enough bees to sample. I'm not sure about that. I didn't work the case. But the sample of the pollen was sent off, because the grower was thinking it was related to the bee death directly. And so it came back with glufosinate. That's an herbicide, and it was found at 0.126 parts per million. But we really couldn't determine the source. I mean, it was going to be, the pollen came off of some plants. Who knows if it was all the same crop or the same field or what it was. So it's not really easy to trace back. And it was sort of difficult to determine if this was the cause of death of the bees, because we didn't have the bees as the sample source to send off as well and really look at. They're really hard to sample and keep intact, basically, and then trace it back. with regard to that. But glufosinate a pretty interesting product. So if this pollen came off of corn, there's and this was asked a little earlier with regard to genetically modified crops, but you'll find Liberty Link corn is what it's called, and that has been modified so that it is not, so it's resistant to the glufosinate. So glufosinate is and it even sounds similar to glyphosate, but glufosinate is a contact herbicide, and glyphosate is a systemic herbicide. So that means it gets into the plant, goes throughout the plant to selective sites, and then does what it's supposed to do. Glufosinate really is only going to take effect on the parts of the plant that it touches. So if the pollen came off of a genetically modified corn crop that they were able to spray glufosinate onto to kill the weeds inside that crop, that would probably account for the glufosinate being inside of that pollen as well. But once again, it's kind of hard to source and backtrack, especially when it comes off of an internet purchase, But this was just something that I wanted to present as well. This is pretty recent that we had this come into our office and take a look at. But it's always surprising what we're going to find inside of these samples that we take, whether it's of wax or honey or bees themselves or pollen, or even just swabbing the outside of bee boxes. Glufosinate was a new one, but it kind of makes sense with if it was a pollen sourced from corn. If it was that Liberty Link type corn, then it kind of makes sense that it was in there. But even still, going back to the label and the way we look at labels, if this was something that we were able to backtrack and source or do anything more locally, and I'd be looking at label language that talks about your harvest interval. And if harvesting pollen is part of that crop, that can be tied back directly to label language. And I would be looking at harvest intervals from the time something was sprayed to the time it's deemed safe to harvest, in essence, and looking to see if that was intact. So there's a number of different ways that we are going to look at pesticide labels, and a number of aspects of those pesticide labels that we can actually touch on. So not just the amount of product that was used, but the time it was used, what it was mixed with, how it was applied, how long it was left on there before harvest. So a number of different ways and things that go into pesticide regulation based on label language. But this one was an interesting one. Glufosinate is kind of an interesting product also because it's formed naturally through soil bacteria is kind of what its chemical background is. But it also a plant can metabolize a naturally occurring quote unquote herbicide into glufosinate. So it's a pretty interesting molecule because it's related to some naturally occurring things that are out there. So it's kind of interesting to think about. But I think the thing that makes the most sense was it probably was sourced from that Liberty Link corn, genetically modified to accept the glufosinate and not be damaged by it. That's what made the most sense with me in this regard on that bee case there. All right, pesticide disposal. This is another program that we do and we fund entirely that I like to put out there. So let's see, there's a little bit to the right. Well, obviously the graph shows from the beginning of this program to 2018, and then the data over on the right talking about our 2019 preliminary numbers. We had 2 events, one in Vado down south and then in Bernalillo as well. And from those events, we were able to bring in, 75,000 plus pounds of pesticide product. So this is nice because this is all the stuff that's left over. It's in the storage sheds. It's, tempting people to use it, but those labels are going to be old labels. They might not even be intact labels. So to use this stuff would really be dangerous and hazardous, not just to the user, but to everybody else around, because there's no label to go off of times with these. There's old label language that they would have to follow versus new label language that might be more restrictive and have more protections, like for pollinators or that sort. So these events that we hold are really successful, and it brings in a lot of product. And so over the time, this well, like 12-year period that we're looking at now, close to getting to anyway. It's been a lot of product that we've been taking out. And so it's been successful, and we're going to continue with this. It's one of our best our programs, and it really gets a lot of stuff out of the channels of trade and the uses, sitting in the barns and sitting in these old storage sheds. So it's a really good program. We're going to continue it, and it has a good positive effect for everybody, really. That's pretty much what I have, and so that's my contact information right there. Email, and then our main website is there as well. That's my cell phone number, so you can contact me there pretty much anytime, either calling or texting, however you want. Email works pretty well. I don't have my email in there, actually, so phone is the way to do it. Call me. I've been answering phones for the main pesticides number, so I'm answering a lot of phone calls these days, not just my normal ones, but it's been pretty busy. But with that, I'll turn it over to questions. If anybody has any questions, I can hopefully answer them.
I have a question. So earlier this year, I think about a month and a half ago, I had a lot of bees that I thought had gotten into some pesticides. And I think I talked to you, Steve, and you were explaining that if we suspect that we need to file a complaint or something. And I wasn't sure, I should have asked you then, but I wasn't sure what you meant by that. Or like, it'd be great if you could just explain maybe what us as beekeepers should do if we suspect that.
Yeah, so if you have a large die-off and it's just, it's suspicious, if you've had good hive health and the bees have been doing well, and all of a sudden there's just this really quick die-off and you're suspecting some sort of pesticide related issue, you can file a complaint with us, and what that'll do is trigger a response where we'll go out from the pesticide group, but then we'll most likely bring an entomology and nursery inspector with us so that they can collect samples of bees and send them in for analysis for any kind of disease or anything like that might be the root of this as well. But we'll go in and usually sample bees as well as much as we can. It takes a lot of bees. That's one thing, is it takes a lot of biomass from them for us to have a good sample. So we would require a lot of bees. But if you do have any suspicion about this, I mean, you can call me directly, and then I'll take it to the next level and give it to who needs to be, or who's going to coordinate that effort between us and entomology. But yeah, you can make a complaint with us, and it triggers that inspection thereafter.
So, and I'm not complaining, but I remember when I contacted, and I'd have to look through my emails, but it was the entomology department at NMSU. They said no one could come out, and they directed me to a lab in California. And so I don't know if it was because of all the COVID stuff or what, but
yeah, if it was in March, it might have been related to that.
Okay.
But,
So Steve, when you say a lot of bees, how many bees is that?
About a cup, maybe 2 cups. About 2 cups is really what they're looking for, is what we've been told by labs. Just because they have to, they dry out pretty quickly, and then they have to have enough they can kind of squish it all up, make it into a paste of sorts, and then chemically extract to be able to run the analysis in the machines. So, a good bunch of bees, like 2 cups worth.
And I have another question. It is a great program, that pesticide disposal that you do. What do we tell our neighbors if we know they spray and they have stuff in their shed? How do they find out about this when it's happening?
So when we first started, it was mainly for our licensed applicators, and it's still predominantly for them, but we've since opened it up to the public. Now it's hard to do because if we open it up, we get a lot of stuff coming in, and it's kind of hard to manage. So we don't really advertise too much, but we let associations like yours know, so that they can sort of spread the word a little bit, but it doesn't go out like in the newspaper, because it happened one year early on and we were just slammed and inundated with it. And it really overwhelmed the contractor that we had in place to accept all the product and send it off. We did as much as we could, but they really didn't have enough equipment to account for it. So we've since kind of upped the budget, but we really talk mostly to your type of organizations, master gardener groups, stuff like that, try to let them know. And usually it is mainly through our licensed folks, as industry folks. But we do accept it from pretty much everybody.
Hey, Steve,
Yeah.
Rinchem takes household hazardous waste. Do you
Right.
know if they will accept pesticides and herbicides that you want to clear out of your shed?
Yeah, as far as I understand for their program, if you live in Albuquerque and you pay your water bill, a portion of that money actually goes to funding Rinchem to accept that stuff. So they will accept, usually it's going to be like home type products. They're not going to accept any kind of like 2.5 gallons or anything that looks more industrial or agricultural size. They'll
Right.
accept the smaller containers that you would commonly find in a garage or someplace like that. But yeah, they will accept those from homeowners here in Bernalillo County.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So Steve,
Yes.
I know that Bernalillo County banned glyphosate.
Right.
And so no farmers or nobody in Bernalillo County are using it, but
Well,
does that cover the city but that doesn't cover the city proper. That's just the Bernalillo County.
Well, what it
Rural.
was is the county itself, so under the
Commission.
jurisdiction of the commissioners, it was ruled that they were banning the use of glyphosate for county properties. So county entities can't use any products. So that means Parks and Recs, open space, any of the other groups that would possibly spray using glyphosate, they're no longer allowed to use it. And so that's where it lies. They weren't able to make a county-wide ban because that steps on our toes basically for primacy. We're the state lead agency, so we're the ones that really have the ability to make that, either enact that or not. So that's kept only to those entities. And City of Albuquerque was looking at it as well. But what they did is just kind of this analysis of their program and kind of took a step back and retooled the way they were approaching weed control. There was a shift in some products and different things like that, and different timing and different methods. County was actually able to get additional funding to hire more people to be able to do more IPM projects, get more people pulling weeds, cutting weeds, and kind of doing that approach. And then they changed, obviously, their chemical inventory to be able to use other products that weren't glyphosate based, but if they had to use them, they had them to be used when they could, basically. So like a shift to pre-emergent herbicide use and things like that is sort of what they did.
I thought those do have glyphosate. They have glyphosate in them, pre-emergent and some of those.
No, pre-emergents are going to be a chemical class that basically you spray it onto the soil. It's meant to bind the soil really tightly. So when you have a germinating seed that actually comes in contact with that treated soil, it stops the plant from germinating. So it completely kills it entirely. But it's a different chemical class altogether. Glyphosate wouldn't have a soil effect like that. It really doesn't last very long in the soil. It's meant to be on the plant, absorbed into the plant, translocated throughout the plant, so it goes to actively growing points, and then it works on those parts there to kill the plant.
Thank you.
Welcome. All right, any other questions? All right, I don't see any. Okay, well, there's my contact information. So again, if you have any questions or if you have a bee kill or anything like that suspected, you can contact me and I'll help out with that.
Steve, I just had one question. I'm up in Santa Fe area, and we often have people spraying for pinon scale up here, and
Right.
beekeepers calling, wondering about if they can't convince their neighbors to use best practices with the application. Are there any studies out there on the different chemicals that are used? I don't even know what they use.
So a lot of times with the scale, kind of depending on the time of year, they'll spray just a kind of a lightweight oil, and it is a labeled pesticide, but what it's meant to do is just smother that scale so that it dies off. So it's not really insecticidal per se, like it's poisonous or toxic to them, but it's meant more of just this product that just covers them and suffocates them in essence. But other times a year they can use insecticides that are going to have more of a direct toxic effect. So once again, it's a little bit of an IPM thing where what time of year is it? Are they timing it correctly for the pests that they have? Do they understand the pest problem that they have? But once again, Driftwatch ties into this, and so what we've been doing since the inception of Driftwatch and our funding of it is communicating to not just like the public entities, like the folks that spray mosquitoes on the ditch banks, but expanding more even to our commercial applicators. And the reason that was decided, and it's an easy argument to make, is I just show them the Driftwatch map, and that it shows that concentration in these urban areas where beekeepers play the largest role in getting their sites on the map. So it's an easy sell for me to show. It's like, look, you got a lot of your customers are going to be in these areas surrounded by folks that have bees. So it's in your best interest to really look at this and be part of the program and be proactive about it so that you don't run into issues, because there are more and more bees occurring in these urban areas. So I'm selling it that way and trying to push the program to make sure that they can look at this and hopefully reach out to communicate about this kind of the stuff that they might have scheduled or spraying that's going to be done, things like that, so that the contractor is aware of it as well, but not just the general public, but the contractor hopefully will be talking about this and being conscientious about it to really use the tool for what it was meant for.
Thank you.
So Steve.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that there is more communication between the applicators and the beekeepers or the organic farmers? Is there more of that cooperation? Have you noticed that over time?
Yeah, we see that when we have inspection, and we have where they'll talk to us and say that, I had a customer maybe in the North Valley, and they had some bees being put out there, and so we switched our product, or we switched our timing, or they were notified so that they could cover their hive. So yeah, I'm definitely seeing some better communication, and that's exactly what Driftwatch was intended for.
Absolutely.
And it works pretty well. Now I'm hoping to see more of that in the ag industry. So the applicators have been pretty good about it, about going and looking, but I'm not sure how much communication is going on, or if they're just taking measures on their own to be very careful, incorporating anti-drift technology into their spraying, or timing things a different way, or adding buffer zones. So, that still remains to be seen a little bit on the ag sector. So eastern side of the state and the southern part of the state.
Steve, could I ask you to go back just a few slides where that link for the Driftwatch was?
Sure. So that's Driftwatch, and then from that one you would be able to get to the Beecheck as well, but I thought I'd include
your screen, Steve.
What's that?
You need to share your screen. You're not sharing your screen, are you?
Yeah, it says I am.
I'm seeing it, Randy.
I guess I have a different view. Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Is it good there?
Yeah, I've got it. Thank you.
Okay, sure. So yeah, I get notified as people sign up or put their sites on here, and so I try to get to them as quick as possible so I can authorize the site, and then you're set to go from there on. There's not much to do except you'll get an email from Driftwatch management when you need to renew the site in the following year. So they're pretty good about getting it early in the year so that people can get their sites renewed. But it's free. We fund it. We'll keep on funding it. It's a good program.
It's a great program. We're encourage everybody to sign up on Driftwatch. And Beecheck sounds really wonderful. So
yeah, it's one specific to beekeepers. And then, attached to those, you can go and through Driftwatch or Beecheck and order signs. that you can put at your locations just to notify people a little bit in another way as well.
And if you're in Bernalillo County, you can call 311 and tell them that you have hives and you don't want them spraying for mosquitoes in your area. I think it's 1,000, isn't it 1,000 square feet or something? I think that's what it is.
Yeah,
So
they'll do pretty well on keeping the buffers around those areas. If they have known areas, they have a good map and good interaction. It's a county and city effort. They're kind of a two agencies combined to do the vector control for the area.
I also talked to some of my neighbors and had them call 311 about the no spray also. So we had even a bigger area. So if you can get your neighbors on board, that's great.
Right. All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks for having me. It's good to.
Thank you, Steve. It was wonderful as always. Very informative.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Oops. Right. Ooh, I'm frozen. I'm frozen. Well, I'm in suspended animation. I think everyone is. Am I off?
We can still hear you okay?
Oh, okay.
You're
All
there,
right.
Lulu.
There I am.
You're back.
I'm animated again. I was concerned about the cicada killer wasp coming to get me if I was in suspended animation, so it's all good. So this was a great meeting, and I just want to tell everybody our July meeting is going to be on the 28th of July, the 4th Tuesday of the month. Thank you, Randy, for hosting this. I couldn't do it without you. We couldn't do it without you, Randy. So the meeting's going to be the 28th, and we're going to talk, believe it or not, in July, the bees are getting ready and preparing their hives for winter. So we're going to have Jessie Brown, who was the president of NMBKA, and she's been a beekeeper for a really long time, and she's really awesome. Talk about preparing your hive for the winter and the advantages of getting your hive to be a little smaller for survival over the winter. For top bar, and John Ferber is going to talk about laying preparation. And I'm sure I'll have John, ask John to talk about mite counts and testing and treating also. Top bars and John for preparation. And I'm sure when your bee population is starting to go to top bars and John laying preparation. Counts and testing and starting to go down, and the micro, you wanna stop that. So that's July. Randy, anything else?
I can't think of anything else. I think we've had a great meeting. Appreciate Steve and Miranda. Very good information.
Okay. So we'll send you out a Zoom about a week before, and anybody who has a suggestion for a 10 minutes of science presentation, please contact me or Randy, and I'll talk to you about what you want to do. So thank you, everybody. This is a club. We're all members. We all can share.
Well, Lou,
In some of the abandoned paper wasp nests, I saw all kinds of leaf cutter bees, the little.
oh
leaf-
yeah,
leaf,
yeah, sure.
cut-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know. I was shocked at all these green leaves in these combs. It was cool.
They'll take it wherever they can get it.
Well, I thought the length, I thought they wanted more length than they've got, in a normal comb.
They do, but
But,
if they can't, they make their little brood
Yeah.
chambers in outlets, electric outlets sometimes, the grounding, the little hole in the electric outlet, which is barely big enough. They've never emerged. I don't know if they get electrocuted or what, but wherever they can find a hole, if there are no natural feeder holes. So, yep. Okay. Thank you,
I've got a
everybody.
random question.
Sure.
Okay, when I go in and check my hives and I'm all done and I come out and take my bee suit off, I'm maybe 50 feet from the hive. There's always one random bee that is pissed off and wants to get you. Is that common?
That's the one angry bee that we all dread.
Well, it nailed my daughter the other day. It was determined to sting someone. And is that common? I mean, it seems like every time I go in my hives, there's always one random bee 5 or 10 minutes after I'm done that's kind of chasing you around my yard.
Well, I would say it could be fairly common. But on the other hand, that particular bee is only going to live a few more weeks. So it's not the same one, which is a good thing. And it does seem to, depend on the time of year.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So it has nothing to do with smell on your body. It's just, I don't know. I can't figure it out, But oh well. I just thought I'd end with a funny little thing that I've always got one bee chasing me when I'm done. Okay, thanks for the meeting.
Jim, I have that same bee that chases me.
Okay,
Not alone.
Wow, that's good.
It wasn't wearing a mask either. It's one of those bees.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How funny.
All right.
Thank you all so much.
Is everyone ready to close the meeting? Anyone have any other comments or questions before we end?
One more question. Is anybody having troubles getting orders through the bee suppliers? I'm having a son of a gun time getting my orders. It's taken weeks.
Yeah, mine are taking
almost
longer.
a couple months.
Yeah, mine have taken longer than usual.
Okay.
I've gotten it finally, but
Well, I just want to do some mite treatment, and then I'm waiting. I've got one hive with small amount of mites and another one that doesn't have any. So I just wanted to do a treatment, and I'm just waiting on supplies for that.
I have some Formic Pro if you want to borrow some and switch it out later.
No, I'm good. I mean, they tell me, they're like 4 days behind or whatever, 4 more days, and they'll be able to ship it. I was just wondering if anybody had the aggravation I've been having for the last 3 months or so, 4 months.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm good. Thank you very much for the offer. That was nice.
Yeah, you're welcome. Great
I'm
meeting,
good.
guys.
Yep. Very nice. Good
All right,
atmosphere.
everyone have a great evening, and thanks for participating and joining us. We'll see you next time.
Good night.
Thanks, Randy. Thanks, Lulu.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You're welcome.
Adios.